Every guitar player wants to be faster, but it's hard. And it really sucks feeling like you'll just never be able to play fast because you've already tried a bunch of different things with no success. And it feels like no matter how hard you try, playing fast just seems like an impossible task for you. So in this video, I'm gonna teach you everything I know about how to play guitar fast. By the way, here's me playing fast. Now let's get down to business. The topics we'll be covering in this lesson go as follows. First, the two main schools of thought when it comes to playing fast. One school of thought is playing slow and gradually increasing your speed over time with a metronome. The other school of thought is just going straight to a tempo that's too fast for you and practicing there even if you sound sloppy. So we're gonna talk about both of those and compare the pros and cons of each. Next, the different types of playing fast. When most people think about fast playing, they think about fast alternate picking, but there's a few other things that you can do to sound fast. After that, we're gonna dive deep into picking mechanics. And then lastly, we'll be covering stamina. How long can you play fast for? And fun fact, I'll be including different exercises for each topic. Let's get started. When it comes to playing guitar fast, there are two different schools of thought. The first school of thought recommends you start at a slow tempo and gradually increase the speed over time. This would be akin to doing a 30-day challenge of some sort. Let's call this the slow methodology. The second school of thought says fuck playing slowly. Just go straight to a tempo that's too fast for you and practice there. This would be like taking a simple exercise you already know and playing it at a tempo that's way too fast for you, resulting in you sounding sloppy. Let's call this the fast methodology. The real question is, which is better? And the answer is, you need both of them. Let me explain. First, you need to figure out what your max tempo is. So if we take a simple 1, 2, 3, 4 exercise, we should be able to find our limit pretty quickly. And by limit, I mean how fast you can play 16th notes. A good way to test this is to play the exercise for 1 minute straight using 16th notes. The tempo where you can just barely do that would be your limit. So now that we have our limit, fast methodology states that we would now increase the tempo to something that's too fast for us and just work on cleaning up our playing. The muscles that we use in our hands and fingers are different for fast playing than they are for slow playing. So in this case, to build speed, it makes sense to use the fast methodology. But there is one small problem. When you actually go to do this, you're gonna notice very quickly that you sound like shit! And in order to tighten up your playing, it's gonna take multiple practice sessions playing at this new fast speed. But after putting in the practice time, you will be able to confidently play at the higher speed. So it seems like the fast methodology is better, yeah? Well, yes, but actually no. Because once you get good at that fast new tempo, eventually you're gonna reach another plateau with your speed. And guess what? That's when you repeat this process over again, which means you're gonna have to increase the tempo on the metronome and do it all again. And that right there is how the slow methodology works. You gradually increase the tempo and work your way up to that new speed. So if the max tempo you could play 16th notes was 100, you could use the fast methodology to help you get to 130. This would take a few practice sessions. But once you're comfortable with that tempo, you could increase the tempo to 150 and repeat this process over again. Then once you get good at 150, next you work your way up to 170. So in the short term, going from 100 to 130, you used the fast methodology. In the long term, going from 100 to 170, you used the slow methodology. So at the end of the day, you're using both. And one could argue, well, Brandon, why not just go from 100 to 170? You could try that. If you've ever tried something like that, feel free to share your story in the comments. But what I predict would happen is unless the person is highly motivated and super disciplined, they would get discouraged way before they reached 170 and stop. Why do I think this? Because I have over 1,000 students in my guitar program, 52-week guitar player. The moral of the story here is you need both methodologies. So when you hear guys saying this,
if you're not able to lock in with that click at that tempo, you're definitely not going to be able to do it when it's a lot faster.
or this,
Imagine for a moment that you have to learn a simple thing that requires coordination. For example, juggling. How will you approach this? By doing it slowly and watch every movement? I don't think so. So why do you learn to play guitar fast this way?
it's not a question of who's right and who's wrong. Both of these guys shred. We just need context. Jamie Robinson has a bunch of in-person students and has to use a simpler approach, so he teaches the slow methodology. Bezog is talking to the people that have practiced this way in the past, but haven't cracked the code yet on how to get faster. So he's teaching the fast methodology. Context guitar shifts. Context. Myself, I'm making this video to show you all that I'm extremely thorough in my approach to teaching and leave no stones unturned. I've studied both methodologies extensively. And by giving you this information for free, it's my hope that you'll want more lessons from me and sign up to my 52-week guitar player program, which is currently open until September 30th, or once 100 new students sign up, whichever comes first. But more on that later. Now let's have a look at some different techniques that, if done well, will make you a faster player. When someone says that they want to play faster, they generally mean that they want to be able to alternate pick faster. Let's have a look at a few exercises you can do to improve your alternate picking speed. These are all exercises that have been a part of my practice routine at some point. This exercise is really great for pushing your alternate picking limits because you don't have to switch strings. You could also do it like this. If you want something a little bit more musical, try this. We're gonna play scales using 3 notes per string. Check it out. That exercise took more time to play through than the first exercise did. Whenever you have a short burst of notes like you did with the first exercise, you'll have a higher limit. So you should be able to play short exercises faster. This next one is somewhere in the middle. These exercises are not hard, by the way. A monkey could do this shit. The hard part is staying consistent, and that is the #1 reason that you guys will fail to get faster. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Brennan Dion. I finished a 4-year music degree. I created an online guitar school in 2019 that's still going strong. I've played in a bunch of different bands throughout the years, and now I have 1 million followers across social media that follow me for my guitar playing and teaching. So when I tell you the #1 reason you won't get faster is because you can't stay consistent, maybe take that seriously. When it comes to this type of speed development practice, those 3 exercises are more than enough to speed up your alternate picking. In general, anything that uses a lot of alternate picking is probably a good way to practice alternate picking. So if you can think of something that's more fun/musical to play, you could easily turn that into a daily alternate picking exercise. Take this for example. On the subject of alternate picking, how would you teach someone to get faster? Yeah, you, watching this video right now. What advice would you give them? Practice every day? Probably. So follow that advice yourself! And when you practice, use both the fast and slow methodologies to achieve your goals. Alternate picking is not the only way to sound fast, by the way. You could also use the legato technique to play faster too. Legato is primarily a left-hand technique. It consists of a shitload of hammer-ons and pull-offs. Here's one of my favorite legato licks. So what we're doing here is playing a scale run in the key of F minor, and I'm just playing groups of 5. So each group follows this pattern. And then I just descend the scale. Okay, so that's in the Dorian position. that I'm playing that. And you'll want to pay extra attention to my right hand because remember, this is a legato lick. So our left hand is doing most of the work. The only notes that I'm picking in each group of 5 would be the first note and the last note. Okay? So for example, pick, pick. All right? That's the first and the last note. Now, once I finish that group of 5, for all of the other groups throughout this example here, I'm actually going to start with an upstroke. Okay? Finish with a downstroke, but then start with an upstroke. Upstroke, downstroke, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke, downstroke, upstroke. Now let's hear it at a faster speed. You can also practice legato by playing 3-note per string scales. Just only pick the first note on each string. If you want something simpler, you can try this. Obviously, anything that uses a lot of legato is a good legato exercise. As long as you're aware of that, you can probably create your own legato exercises. Here's something a bit more musical. Make sure as well that you're increasing the tempo over time. I recommend you track your progress, otherwise you will not improve. If you aren't tracking, you don't care. Next, let's talk about sweep picking. Sweep picking can sound very fast. Here's a quick lesson on sweep picking. Sweep picking requires you to know arpeggios. And an arpeggio is just a broken chord, which means instead of playing all the notes of the chord together, you play them separately. I personally like to sweep 7th chords because I prefer to sweep 4 notes instead of 3. I already made a really fucking good video about sweep picking, so if you want to learn more about that, definitely check it out. Another technique that will make you sound fast is tapping. If you're a fucking noob when it comes to tapping, then you can try something like this. Age revealed, 1 million subs. I prefer to tap with my middle finger, but I know that there are some mentally unstable people out there that prefer to tap with their index. Those people are on cigarettes! But what sounds really cool is when you tap across multiple strings, like this. Now let's talk about picking mechanics. This is super important because what a lot of guitar players fail to understand about playing fast is that there are tiny things that make massive differences. I, too, did not understand this for a very long time. A good example of this is playing the pentatonic scale. When you play a pentatonic scale, you're typically playing 2 notes per string. But did you know that if you start with a downstroke instead of an upstroke, you will not play them as fast? This is because of a concept known as inside versus outside picking. So with inside picking, we're moving in the direction toward our next string. So if we're playing a pentatonic scale and we're playing 2 notes per string, that means it makes sense to start with an upstroke. Because if we're alternate picking, our next picking direction is going to be a downstroke, right? Which is toward our next string. See how I'm moving toward the A string? Right? This is inside picking. Outside picking would be when we move in the direction away from our next string. So if I play that same scale, but I start with a downstroke and I alternate pick everything, you can see how I'm now moving in the direction away from the next string. I'm moving away from the A string, and now I have to go back to it. And I'm moving away from the D string now. So on and so forth. Now, it actually does make sense to start with a downstroke though when we descend, okay? Because when we descend the scale, we actually will be moving this direction, and that means that we're starting with a downstroke, an upstroke is moving toward the next string, right? Now I'm moving closer to the B string, closer to the G string, closer to the D string, so on and so forth. So the general rule is if you're playing 2 notes per string, you want to start with an upstroke if you're going this direction, and you want to start with a downstroke if you're moving this direction. These are picking mechanics that people don't really talk a whole lot about, but if you are aware of them, you will play faster. Another technique that's a little better known is called pick slanting. I have mixed feelings about pick slanting, but it definitely works well when you have an even group of notes on one string. Imagine we're playing an even group of notes on each string. Let's go with groups of 6. If we start with a downstroke, this means that we'll end with an upstroke. Now, without using the pick slanting technique, I would have to hop over the E string again to get back into position to now pick the A string. But if I slant my pick downward, you can see that my pick will be in a position where it doesn't have to hop over the E string again to reach the A string. This downward slant still applies even if you start at the high E string and move in the direction toward the low E. When I learned about this picking mechanic, it did help me play faster. But here's what I dislike about pick slanting. It's important to mention that there are 2 types of pick slanting: the downward slant and the upward slant. The downward slant works great when you have an even group of notes per string, like 4 or 6, because the way you hold the pick does not change. But if you have 3 notes per string, or any odd group of notes, then you have to use the upward slant to avoid the hopping motion. This isn't necessarily a problem by itself, but if you continue to play 3 notes per string, you'll have to keep switching between an upward slant and a downward slant because your picking direction will change every time you switch strings. This is very inefficient, unlike with 4 notes per string where you just use a downward slant the entire time. If your goal is to play guitar faster, I strongly encourage you to think about picking direction. The direction in which you pick will have a major effect on how fast you play something at higher speeds. Let me share a story with you. It took me 7 weeks of practice to get this down. Notice what I'm doing here. I'm sweeping this line, but when I tried it the first time, I tried to alternate pick everything. Didn't work very well. So instead of changing my picking direction for every single note with alternate picking, I decided to sweep it instead. This helped me play it way faster. I wanted to show this to you guitar chefs out there because I wanted to give you a real example where I had to think a lot about how I was picking something. So the next time you're working on something that's fast and challenging, think about how you're picking it. Is there a better way? Imagine working on something like this and having a professional right there beside you in your fucking house to help you out. You could show him a lick you're working on and get his opinion on the best way to play it. Or if you had any questions about getting faster in general, he'd be able to guide you so you could get fast as hell. Well, that's exactly what you'd get if you enrolled in 52-Week Guitar Player. 52-Week Guitar Player is an online guitar school I created in 2019. In this program, you will receive structure, practice routines, feedback, accountability, live interaction with pros, and big fun in the sun. Unlike every other guitar course out there, 52-Week Guitar Player is personalized. The entire program is super structured, so you don't have have to waste time playing the detective and trying to piece things together and figure out things on your own. Also, every time you post a video in the group, you'll receive feedback from a pro in video form a minimum of 24 hours after you post it. This is guaranteed in 52-week guitar player. One student recently completed 109 days of straight practice and got feedback for every single progress video that he posted in the group. That's 109 days in a row of getting feedback from a professional. He even made a video talking about it.
I cannot thank the instructors enough. They helped me and they were assigned to me and they were always helpful and a valuable resource. Like, I can't express this enough.
I'll link that in the description. And after 2.5 months, we are currently open until September 30th, or until 100 new students sign up, whichever comes first. And if you're watching this video after June of 2024, grab your spot on the waiting list. The link will be in the description. We have a 90-day refund policy anyway, so go ahead and join now. Technically, you could grab a spot to avoid missing out and always refund if you didn't like it, but I'm confident you'll love it once you get rolling. Just check out what these students had to say. The link to join will be in the description for as long as we remain open. And this video on the website will have more information. Watch it. By the time you see this video though, we're probably gonna be closed again for another few months. But this is fine. I'll still put the link to the waiting list in the description. You have nothing to lose by signing up to the waiting list. And even if you don't end up enrolling once we open again, at least you'll have the option. Whereas if you didn't sign up to the waiting list, you may not even get that. Also, everyone that signs up to the waiting list will get a free copy of my scale ebook in PDF form. Get all the major scale modes, harmonic minor modes, melodic minor modes, and more for free when you sign up to the waiting list. The last question we need to answer when it comes to speed is, how long can you play fast for? To build up your stamina, here's what you do. Play fast for a long time without stopping. 1 to 3 minutes to be exact. Now, obviously the tempo you choose won't be something that's impossible for you because in order to stay clean for that long, you'll be picking a tempo that is actually a bit lower than what your usual limit would be. You could play a chain exercise, which is where you play a continuous string of notes without stopping in one key. Doing that exercise would require you to know what key you're playing in very well, and most of you guys just aren't gonna be able to do that. Maybe with some practice though. But if you'd like something simpler, consider doing an exercise like this. Okay, that's everything I know about playing fast. Once this video is done, I'm sure I'll think of a few other things that I could have included. But for now, just leave!